Opening mystery. The question lingers in the air like the echo of a half-forgotten dream. What if we're not the first civilization on Earth? The idea carries a weight both unsettling and strangely comforting. Unsettling because it pulls us out of our modern sense of uniqueness, the conviction that we stand at the pinnacle of history. Comforting because it reminds us that the story of life has always been more intricate, more layered than any one generation or species could fully grasp. Civilizations rise, fall, and leave behind shadows. But what if some rose long before ours, now erased so thoroughly by time that we know them only in hints, in whispers, in impossible artifacts that shouldn't exist? Mainstream science tells a clear story of us. Modern Homo sapiens appear around 300,000 years ago in Africa, evidenced by fossils from sites like Jebel Irhoud in Morocco. Our kind gradually spread, carrying tools, fire, art, and stories. By 50,000 years ago, we painted caves in Europe and Australia, leaving behind ochre outlines of hands and graceful animal figures. By 12,000 years ago, we began farming, domesticating wheat in the Fertile Crescent and rice in the Yangtze Valley. Civilizations, as scholars define them, cities, writing, complex institutions, emerged only around 5,000 to 6,000 years ago, with Sumer in Mesopotamia often given the title of the first. Yet scattered through the record are anomalies. A 260 million year old rock in Oklahoma once yielded what looked like a hammer embedded in its matrix. A fossilized footprint in Permian strata in New Mexico appeared to show a shoe sole complete with stitch marks. These so-called out-of-place artifacts, or OOPArts, are often dismissed as misinterpretations, hoaxes, or natural formations. Still, they spark a recurring question. Could the story be more complex than the textbook narrative? The Earth, after all, is a destroyer as much as a preserver. Geological time doesn't archive delicately. It crushes, melts, erodes, and buries. Entire mountain ranges are recycled into magma, seabeds rise to become peaks, and forests vanish beneath deserts. If an advanced civilization had thrived hundreds of thousands or even millions of years ago, how much would remain after such relentless cycles? Scholars still debate whether the absence of evidence is really evidence of absence, or whether we should look more carefully at the cracks in our accepted timelines. Consider how fragile our own world is. Our skyscrapers, satellites, and digital clouds seem enduring, but in truth they are ephemeral. Left untended, cities crumble quickly. Steel rusts, concrete fractures, glass returns to sand. Within 10,000 years, less than a blink on the geological scale, most traces of us would be gone. The ruins of New York or Shanghai might be recognizable for a time, but eventually covered by jungle, ocean, or ice. Our memory would dissolve into sedimentary layers, awaiting some future intelligence to puzzle over fragments. If that's true for us, what of those who may have come before? Legends echo faintly of cycles and destructions. The Babylonians told of antediluvian kings who ruled for thousands of years before a flood swept them away. The Maya spoke of previous suns, worlds destroyed in fire, wind, or water, only for life to begin again. The Hopi remember clans wiped out by catastrophe, spared only when led underground by spiritual guides. Across cultures and continents, the same murmur persists. We are not the first, only the latest. Myths can be allegory, of course, but they can also be cultural memory, dimmed and reshaped over millennia. This opening mystery is less about proving a point and more about framing a possibility. Imagine Earth as a palimpsest, a manuscript written and erased countless times. The lines we can read, the pyramids, the cuneiform tablets, the stone circles, belong to the last few thousand years, but beneath them, hidden in the erased ink, may lie chapters no one alive remembers. To ask the question, what if we're not the first, is not to deny what science tells us, but to open a door to wonder, to humility, to the possibility that deep time is stranger than we can yet imagine. Fossils and bones. The accepted tale of humanity's beginnings is carved out of fossils and bones. Each fragment of skull or chipped flint tool helps assemble the slow unfolding of our species. In Ethiopia's Omo Kibish Formation, bones dated to around 195,000 years old reveal one of the earliest anatomically modern humans. In South Africa, the Rising Star Cave yielded Homo naledi, a species that walked upright but had a small brain, raising questions about intelligence and complexity. These are the mainstream milestones taught in classrooms and narrated in museums. Homo sapiens, emerging in Africa, dispersing in waves, replacing or absorbing other hominins like Neanderthals and Denisovans. Yet alongside the neat line of fossils lie more dissonant notes. In 1889, near Spring Valley, Nevada, miners reported uncovering a petrified giant, allegedly more than 12 feet tall. Though most scholars dismissed it as exaggeration or outright fraud, the tale slipped into folklore, fueling speculation about vanished races of titans. In Peru, elongated skulls found at Paracas have been explained largely as the result of cranial binding, a cultural practice. Still, fringe theorists hold them up as evidence of non-human ancestry, strange branches on our evolutionary tree. These anomalies may not withstand rigorous testing, but they persist like burrs caught in the fabric of our narrative. One reason debates flare so easily is that fossils are exceedingly rare. The conditions required for preservation are narrow: quick burial, mineral-rich groundwater, an absence of scavengers. For every skeleton discovered, millions vanish into the soil unnoticed. Scholars still debate whether the fossil record represents a fair sampling of the past or simply a biased lottery of preservation. If large stretches of early humanity are already invisible, how much more might be hidden from deeper time? Side also the subtle hints in our DNA. The genomes of modern humans carry traces of encounters with Neanderthals and Denisovans, species we only identified physically within the last 2 decades. A ghost population, neither Neanderthal nor Denisovan, seems to have left its imprint in West African lineages. These discoveries remind us that our story is not linear, but braided, a web of kinships now forgotten. If even within the last 100,000 years, entire peoples can vanish almost without a trace, what of civilizations that may have flourished far earlier? The image of our ancestors has shifted dramatically over time. 19th century depictions often cast them as brutish, stooped, and primitive. Today, we recognize Neanderthals as skilled toolmakers, symbolic artists, and likely seafarers. A painted cave hand in Spain, dated to 64,000 years ago, predates Homo sapiens' arrival in Europe, implying that Neanderthals created it. This small fact overturns older assumptions about cognitive exclusivity. Scholars still debate whether other hominins developed language, abstract thought, or even rudimentary social complexity. Each new find nudges the line between them and us. Then there are the unsettling whispers of footprints. In Latoli, Tanzania, 3.6 million-year-old tracks show Australopithecus afarensis walking upright in volcanic ash. They confirm our lineage's early bipedalism, but in other places, alleged footprints cut into ancient rock layers appear far too modern in form, their authenticity hotly contested. Are they natural formations, hoaxes, or signs of something we cannot yet reconcile? Mainstream science rejects most, but their existence in folklore keeps alive the suspicion that the fossil record is incomplete. The bones we have tell a story of emergence, adaptation, and survival. But bones are only bones. Mute fragments, not the full chorus of human history. They cannot tell us what vanished cities might have stood, what stories were spoken, or what knowledge may have risen and then perished with forgotten peoples. In their silence, they remind us how much of the past is absence, how easily entire chapters can be lost to the long erosion of time. Deep time's silence. When we speak of history, we often mean a few thousand years. Empires, kings, revolutions, wars. Archaeology stretches that canvas to tens of thousands, back to the last ice age and the first cave painters. But the Earth itself measures time not in millennia, but in eons, stretching billions of years across shifting continents, rising seas, and falling skies. In that scale, human civilization is scarcely more than a breath, and in that silence of deep time lies an uncomfortable truth. The planet is a ruthless archivist, preserving only fragments, erasing almost everything else. Consider the Grand Canyon, where exposed strata reveal nearly 2 billion years of Earth's past. Each layer speaks of vanished seas, deserts and forests. Yet even in this monumental record, what we see is not continuity, but gaps. Entire epochs are missing, swallowed by erosion, subduction or metamorphosis. Geologists call these absences unconformities, the quiet blank spaces where history was obliterated. If entire landscapes can vanish, what of civilizations built upon them? Scholars still debate whether the geological record, vast though it is, could ever preserve the fragile traces of cultures that might have risen millions of years ago. Mainstream geology teaches us that human civilization sits squarely within the Holocene, a mere 11,700 years old. Before that, glaciers waxed and waned, reshaping continents. Seas rose hundreds of feet, drowning coasts where early people once walked. Doggerland, the land bridge that once connected Britain to mainland Europe, now lies beneath the North Sea, its villages and hunters forgotten. That is only a blink of deep time, yet already entire landscapes are erased from memory. Multiply that by tens of millions of years, and the silence becomes nearly absolute. Fringe tales occasionally slip into this silence. In 1885, workers in Oster claimed to find an iron cube embedded in coal, seemingly manufactured yet locked within rock 60 million years old. Some argue it was contamination, a tool that fell into a crack. Others insist it whispers of forgotten forges. In Illinois, the Wilburton coal mine yielded reports of a bell-like object fused within coal, its metal composition unusual. Whether hoaxes, errors, or anomalies, such stories play on a tantalizing theme. What if deep time hides evidence we simply do not know how to read? Even in more recent ages, survival is tenuous. Bronze corrodes, papyrus crumbles, wood rots. Without deliberate preservation, artifacts dissolve within centuries. The famed Dead Sea Scrolls endured only because of the dry desert caves. Imagine then the challenge of anything surviving hundreds of thousands of years, let alone millions. Scholars still debate whether modern humanity's most enduring legacies will be plastic polymers, nuclear isotopes, or little more than faint chemical traces detectable in rock strata. If that is all we leave behind, then how much harder would it be to detect predecessors who may have risen and fallen long before us? There is also the great recycling engine of plate tectonics. Ocean floors are consumed into the mantle every 200 million years or so. Continents collide, mountains rise, and are ground back down. The Earth is not a static museum, but a restless machine, remaking itself again and again. Whatever traces lie upon its skin are constantly at risk of being wiped away. Our monuments, our cities, our very bones would scarcely survive such churning. If civilizations once stood in ages long past, their memorials may already have been subducted into the molten depths. This silence of deep time is not proof of anything. It is not proof that others existed before us, nor proof that they did not. It is instead a reminder of scale, of how small our window of knowledge is compared to the immensity of geological history. We live atop a vast archive written mostly in disappearing ink, where every so often a page remains legible, while countless others are gone. To ponder this is to feel both humbled and awed, as if standing in a library where nearly every book has burned, leaving only ash and a handful of words to guide our imagination. Flood myths. In nearly every corner of the world, people tell stories of a great flood. Some recount a single deluge that swept away nearly all life. Others speak of repeated inundations, each erasing an age before ours. In Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh preserves the tale of Utnapishtim, who survives a divine storm in a boat laden with animals. In Genesis, Noah mirrors him, carrying life through 40 days of rain. The Greeks told of Deucalion and Pyrrha, who floated in a chest after Zeus drowned a corrupt humanity. In India, Manu was warned by a fish to build an ark. In the Americas, from the Hopi to the Maya, similar motifs endure. Waters rising, humanity punished or renewed, a few survivors tasked with rebuilding. Mainstream historians interpret these myths as cultural reflections of real but regional disasters. The Black Sea flood theory suggests that around 5600 BCE, Mediterranean waters surged into the Black Sea basin, overwhelming early farming villages. In Mesopotamia itself, river flooding along the Tigris and Euphrates was frequent and devastating, easily seeding stories of catastrophic deluge. These are plausible origins, rooted in local events magnified through storytelling. Yet the universality of flood myths unsettles easy explanation. Why do cultures separated by oceans, with no known contact, share such similar tales? Scholars still debate whether these narratives spread outward from a single source, or whether human societies independently encoded memories of Ice Age meltwaters. Around 12,000 years ago, glaciers receded dramatically, sea levels rising over 300 feet, drowning vast coastal plains. Any settlements clinging to Ice Age shorelines would now be submerged. If civilizations existed then, their ruins lie hidden beneath the waves, preserved only in memory carried by survivors. Fringe thinkers point to sunken ruins as echoes of these myths. Off the coast of India, the city of Dwarka is said to have been reclaimed by the sea. Divers have found stone structures beneath the waves. Near Japan's Yonaguni Island, submerged terraces resemble step pyramids. While many geologists argue they are natural formations, the resemblance is haunting. Plato's account of Atlantis, often dismissed as allegory, places the destruction of a great city by flood and fire around 9,000 years before his time. The details align uncannily with the cataclysmic floods of the Younger Dryas period. Coincidence or distant memory? Even modern geology nods toward catastrophe. The Missoula floods, unleashed by the breaking of an Ice Age glacial dam, scoured the Pacific Northwest with torrents 10 times the combined flow of all Earth's rivers. In minutes, entire valleys reshaped, boulders hurled like pebbles, landscapes rewritten. Imagine a human settlement caught in such a deluge. It would vanish utterly, leaving little trace but sediment. Stories may have been all that endured, carried down generations until myth clothed them in divine imagery. The question then is not whether floods happened, they surely did, but whether they were destructive enough to erase whole civilizations. Scholars still debate how advanced Ice Age cultures truly were. Were they nomadic bands of hunter-gatherers, or did some achieve fleeting complexity, clustered along coasts now submerged? The myths insist on the latter, telling us of resets, of humanity starting over. Perhaps the enduring power of these stories lies not in their literal truth, but in their resonance with human fragility. We know even now how storms can shatter cities, how rising seas threaten our own coastlines. To ancient people, the flood was the ultimate reminder. Everything built upon the land can be swept away in a single, overwhelming tide, and so they remembered, across continents, across millennia. That water is both giver of life and its most merciless eraser. Göbekli Tepe, high on a hill in southeastern Turkey, beneath layers of soil that shielded it for millennia, lies a site that rewrote our understanding of early humanity. Gobleckli Tepe, first unearthed in the 1990s by German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, is a temple complex dating back to around 9600 BCE. That's 12,000 years ago, thousands of years before Stonehenge, before the pyramids, even before agriculture as we commonly define it. Here stand towering T-shaped pillars, some over 15 feet tall and weighing up to 20 tons, arranged in great circular enclosures. They are carved with foxes, vultures, snakes, and abstract symbols, and they were deliberately buried by their builders, preserved like a time capsule until rediscovery. Mainstream archaeology describes Göbekli Tepe as the handiwork of early hunter-gatherers, a ritual centre built before permanent villages or farms. If true, it upends long-held assumptions that complex religion followed agriculture, that monuments required settled life. Instead, Göbekli Tepe suggests the reverse, that belief and ceremony may have driven the very birth of civilization. People gathered here, feasted and built together, then slowly transitioned into farming in the surrounding valleys. The temple, in this view, is humanity's first great house of worship, a spark of collective imagination. But fringe voices see something stranger. How did nomadic people, with stone tools and no wheels, quarry and move such massive stones? Why do some carvings appear to show astronomical constellations, as if the builders mapped the sky? One pillar, nicknamed the Vulture Stone, has been interpreted by some as a star chart of a cosmic event, the Younger Dryas impact around 10,900 BCE, when a comet is theorized to have struck Earth, triggering global climate shifts. If true, Göbekli Tepe may not only be a temple, but also a memorial to Catastrophe. Holers still debate whether these carvings truly encode astronomy, or whether we impose patterns that were never intended. There is also the mystery of the burial. Around 8000 BCE, the site was filled with debris and sealed. Who did this, and why? Was it reverence, an attempt to preserve sacred ground, or was it a cultural rejection, a deliberate burying of the past? If it were not buried, it might have eroded to nothing. Instead, it remains to taunt us with questions. Göbekli Tepe also invites comparisons to myths of a golden age, when gods or culture bringers taught humanity arts and sciences. In later Sumerian legends, the Apkallu were sages who emerged after the flood to restore order. Could this site be a memory of such an age, a place where the first organized knowledge was passed down? Or is it simply the natural flowering of human ingenuity, underestimated until now? Even among the mainstream, Göbekli Tepe demonstrates how easily our assumptions can crumble. Before its discovery, the idea of monumental architecture before farming would have been laughed out of conferences. Now it stands as fact, a reminder that we may only glimpse fragments of the human story. Scholars still debate whether other, equally shocking sites remain buried under soil, desert, or sea, waiting to force another rewrite of history. Standing among the pillars today, one feels both awe and vertigo. The stones seem to whisper of a civilization older, stranger, and perhaps more advanced than we imagined. And yet, like much of deep history, their meaning is buried with them, leaving us to wonder, was Göbekli Tepe the beginning of civilization as we know it, or the faint echo of something even earlier, almost forgotten? Antikythera device. In the spring of 1901, sponge divers off the Greek island of Antikythera stumbled upon a shipwreck resting 150 feet below the waves. Among the statues, amphorae, and bronze fragments retrieved was a corroded lump of metal that seemed unremarkable. Decades later, when it was carefully studied, the lump revealed itself as one of the most confounding artifacts ever discovered. A gear-driven machine of astonishing complexity built more than 2,000 years ago. Now known as the Antikythera mechanism, the device is often described as the world's first computer. Consisting of at least 30 bronze gears, it could predict lunar and solar eclipses, track the cycles of the moon, and model the motions of planets according to ancient Greek astronomy. A dial even indicated the timing of athletic games like the Olympics. Modern CT scans show inscriptions and gear ratios of mind-bending precision, suggesting an advanced grasp of mathematics and engineering far beyond what we once credited to the Hellenistic world. Mainstream historians place its construction in the 2nd century BCE, perhaps linked to a workshop in Rhodes where astronomer Hipparchus worked. It may have been a product of that brief dazzling age when Greek science flourished under patronage, then largely forgotten after political collapse. The Roman Empire, though formidable in governance and warfare, never replicated such mechanisms. For over 1,000 years afterward, nothing comparable appears in the record. And that is the unsettling part. How could such a machine emerge, only to vanish, leaving no clear lineage? Scholars still debate whether the Antikythera device was unique, or whether it represents the tip of an iceberg, a tradition of advanced engineering lost to time. If only one has survived, how many others might have perished in shipwrecks, fires, or decay? The silence surrounding it is as mysterious as the gears themselves. Fringe theories lean further. Some argue the Antikythera mechanism is too advanced for its time, evidence of knowledge inherited from a far older source, perhaps an earlier, forgotten civilization. They point to how sudden and anomalous its sophistication seems, a lone lighthouse in a dark sea. Skeptics counter that human genius often emerges in bursts, that lost manuscripts may have contained the necessary steps, and that we underestimate the talents of ancient artisans. Yet the mystery remains, a leap so bold, then so utterly lost. The device also stirs comparison to myths of lost knowledge. In Plato's dialogues, Atlantis was said to possess wondrous works of engineering. In Babylonian lore, the Apkallu brought advanced wisdom to humankind. Could the Antikythera mechanism be a faint echo of such mythic legacies, technology surfacing briefly, like a memory that slips from the subconscious? What makes the story even stranger is its rediscovery. For half a century after it was pulled from the sea, the device languished in obscurity, dismissed as a curiosity. Only with modern imaging did its true design emerge. This raises another question. How many other artifacts sit in museum basements, unlabeled, unstudied, holding secrets we have yet to unlock? The Antikythera mechanism reminds us that history is not a smooth curve of progress. It is jagged, interrupted, prone to sudden brilliance and just as sudden collapse. Scholars still debate whether we should see it as an isolated marvel or evidence of a lost tradition. But in either case, it speaks to the fragility of knowledge, how easily even the most dazzling achievements can vanish, leaving us to rediscover them centuries or millennia later. The Sphinx's age debate on the Giza plateau beneath the burning Egyptian sun. The Great Sphinx rests in silence. Its leonine body and human face, eroded yet enduring, have gazed eastward for millennia. Traditionally dated to around 2500 BCE, it is attributed to Pharaoh Khafra of the 4th dynasty. This date aligns with the building of the nearby pyramids, and the Sphinx is thought to represent the pharaoh himself, guardian of his mortuary complex. In the mainstream view, the monument is a masterpiece of Old Kingdom artistry, cut directly from the limestone bedrock, with a body later repaired and reshaped by successive dynasties. Yet controversy clings to the Sphinx like desert sand. In the early 1990s, Boston University geologist Robert Schoch argued that the heavy weathering on the Sphinx's body was caused not by wind and sand, but by rainfall, rainfall of the kind Egypt has not experienced since long before 2500 BCE. If true, this would suggest the Sphinx was carved thousands of years earlier, perhaps as far back as 7000–9000 BCE, when the Sahara was green with lakes and savannas. The claim ignited fierce debate, for it implied the existence of advanced builders long before the rise of dynastic Egypt. Scholars still debate whether the weathering is indeed due to rain, or whether wind, salt, and centuries of neglect can explain it. There are also peculiar details. The Sphinx's head is disproportionately small compared to its body, leading some to suggest it was recarved from an older statue. Was the original head that of a lion, later reshaped into a pharaoh's visage? If so, who sculpted the original, and when? The possibility lingers that the Sphinx is far older than the pyramids beside it, a relic inherited by later Egyptians, rather than commissioned by them. Legends, too, cloud its history. Ancient Egyptians themselves called it Hor-em-Akhet, Horus of the Houris, and associated it with solar deities, but Greek and Arab travellers ascribed mysterious powers to it, speaking of hidden chambers and lost wisdom sealed beneath its pores. In 1817, Giovanni Battista Caviglia dug near the Sphinx in search of such secrets. Later, in the 1920s, Egyptologist Emile Barresi conducted further clearings, revealing much of the body buried in sand. Despite intensive study, whispers remain of Hall of Records chambers still undiscovered, though radar surveys have produced inconclusive results. Fringe theorists argue that the Sphinx connects to lost civilizations, Atlantean engineers or culture bringers who seeded early Egypt with advanced knowledge. They note its alignment with the rising sun at the equinox, suggesting sophisticated astronomical design. Some even propose it once gazed at the constellation Leo during the age of Leo around 10,500 BCE, aligning monument and stars. Critics counter that alignments can be coincidental, and that astronomy alone cannot redate the monument. Yet the debate refuses to die. Part of the allure lies in what the Sphinx represents, the persistence of mystery, even in one of the most studied landscapes on Earth. We know who built the pyramids, we know their functions and their contexts. But the Sphinx resists final certainty, its weathered flanks holding secrets that may never be fully resolved. Scholars still debate whether its erosion proves an older origin, or whether it is simply a case of geology misread. Standing before it, one feels both awe and disquiet. The monument seems to belong to another age, gazing not just across the desert, but across time itself. Was it truly the product of 4th dynasty Egypt, or an heirloom from a forgotten epoch, adopted and reimagined by later rulers? The answer remains buried, perhaps forever, in the stone itself, mute testimony to the possibility that the past is older and stranger than we dare to believe. Sunken cities. Beneath the restless seas of our planet, there are places where ruins sleep. In some, the outlines of walls and streets seem unmistakable, as if whole cities were swallowed by the ocean. In others, terraces and blocks blur the line between natural formations and deliberate construction. Together they form a tantalizing chorus, whispering of civilizations drowned and forgotten. Take Dwarka, off India's western coast. In 2001, marine archaeologists surveying the Gulf of Kambat reported structures submerged 120 feet underwater, rectangular patterns, walls, and artifacts carbon dated to around 9500 BCE. If accurate, this would place the site thousands of years before the Harappan civilization, aligning with Hindu legends of Dwarka, the city of Lord Krishna, which was said to have been reclaimed by the sea. Critics argue the findings are misinterpreted, that the formations are geological, and that carbon samples may have been contaminated. Scholars still debate whether Dwarka represents a true sunken city or a mirage born of natural rock and human imagination. Far to the east, near Japan's Yonaguni Island, divers in 1987 stumbled upon a submerged plateau with massive steps, terraces and flat walls. Some call it the Yonaguni Monument, interpreting it as a pyramid-like structure built over 10,000 years ago. Others insist it is the product of tectonic fracturing, the sea sculpting sandstone into eerily geometric forms. The debate rages. Is it a temple of a lost Pacific culture or merely nature's handiwork? Scholars still debate whether human tool marks found on certain stones prove deliberate construction, or whether wishful thinking is guiding the eye. The Mediterranean holds its own legends. Off the coast of Greece, near Pavlopetri, archaeologists have confirmed an actual sunken city, 5,000 years old, complete with streets, courtyards and tombs. Unlike Yonaguni or Dwarka, Pavlopetri is accepted as genuine, its submergence explained by tectonic activity and gradual sea rise. It reminds us that not all tales of sunken cities are myth. Sometimes they are history waiting in the shallows. And then there is the most famous of all, Atlantis. Plato described it as a mighty civilization beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which sank beneath the sea in a single day and night of misfortune. Many see this as allegory, a moral tale about hubris and decline, but seekers have scoured the globe for traces in the Azores, the Caribbean, even Antarctica. No definitive evidence has ever emerged, but the myth persists, perhaps because it resonates so deeply with other accounts of drowned lands. Modern science provides a sobering context. At the end of the last ice age, melting glaciers caused sea levels to rise dramatically, flooding vast tracts of coastal land. Doggerland, once connecting Britain to Europe, now lies beneath the North Sea. Sunda Shelf, which linked Indonesia to mainland Asia, was transformed into scattered islands. Countless Ice Age shorelines, where early humans likely settled, are now buried underwater, awaiting exploration. If early complex societies existed, many would be lost beneath waves. Fringe researchers go further, suggesting entire continents, Mu, Lemuria, once existed in the Pacific or Indian Oceans, supporting civilizations now erased. While geology rules out continents vanishing wholesale in such recent times, smaller land masses and coastal plains certainly drowned, carrying any settlements with them. The myths of lost lands may be cultural echoes of this real inundation. Whether myth or reality, the allure of sunken cities lies in their symbolism. They represent the fragility of civilization, the way seas and time erase even the grandest works. They also embody possibility, the idea that our history is incomplete, that beneath the oceans lie forgotten chapters waiting for rediscovery. Each submerged ruin, whether proven or disputed, keeps alive the question, how much of our past still sleeps beneath the waves, beyond our reach? Maps of the impossible. Among the dusty collections of old cartographers, there are maps that seem to know more than they should. Perhaps the most famous is the Piri Reis map, drawn in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral who claimed to have based it on dozens of earlier sources. The surviving fragment shows parts of Europe, Africa and South America with surprising accuracy. But what has drawn endless fascination is a section at the southern edge. Some claim it depicts Antarctica, not only centuries before its official discovery in 1820, but shown without the thick ice sheet that has covered it for thousands of years. Mainstream scholars explain the anomaly more cautiously. They argue that the supposed Antarctic coastline may instead be a distorted rendering of South America, stretched by the limitations of early navigation. The jagged shapes of maps often came not from deliberate knowledge, but from copying and miscopying earlier charts. Yet fringe theorists remain unconvinced. How could a 16th century admiral so accurately plot parts of South America that Europeans had barely explored unless he had access to knowledge preserved from a much earlier age? Scholars still debate whether the map's precision is coincidence, misinterpretation, or evidence of a deeper mystery. The Piri Reis map is not alone. The Orontius Phineus map of 1531 also appears to depict Antarctica's outline in detail, including rivers and mountains beneath the ice. The Bouache map of 1737, drawn by a French geographer, showed two separate landmasses, where modern surveys later revealed Antarctica's underlying geology split into east and west. To some, these are uncanny coincidences. To others, they suggest that fragments of much older surveys, perhaps made in a time when the continent was ice-free, trickled down through lost civilizations. Mainstream geology reminds us that Antarctica has been ice-covered for millions of years, with only its outermost fringes occasionally ice-free. But fringe voices argue for shorter cycles of glaciation, suggesting that coastal areas may have been accessible far more recently than consensus allows. If true, the possibility emerges that early seafarers, perhaps even a forgotten civilization, mapped them long before the modern age. Scholars still debate how such detailed depictions could arise without advanced navigation, and whether these maps reveal genuine anomalies or only the creative liberties of cartographers. The allure of these impossible maps is not limited to Antarctica. The Zeno map of 1558 shows Greenland without its thick glaciers. The Haji Ahmed map of 1559 depicts parts of the Americas with uncanny precision, hinting at voyages across oceans long before Columbus. Critics counter that early maps often combined rumour, imagination, and projection errors, resulting in shapes that coincidentally resemble modern coastlines. But the persistence of uncanny accuracy raises eyebrows. Even if we discard Antarctica altogether, the very existence of detailed global maps in the 1500s is intriguing. They suggest a tradition of cartographic knowledge far more advanced than we credit, possibly inherited from older sources. Piri Reis himself admitted as much, writing in his notes that he compiled his map from 20 charts and mappae mundi, some drawn in the time of Alexander the Great. Whether he exaggerated or not, the claim reflects a belief that ancient knowledge survived, passed down in fragments through the centuries. To modern eyes, maps are objective, precise, mathematical. To ancient societies, they were also symbolic, blending memory, myth, and exploration. Perhaps the so-called maps of the impossible reveal less about literal coastlines and more about humanity's attempt to imagine the world whole, yet they continue to haunt us with the possibility that they preserve glimpses of a forgotten global knowledge, hints that others may have charted the world long before our textbooks begin. Lost giants. Scattered through the pages of folklore and archaeology are stories of beings far larger than us, giants who once walked the earth, leaving behind bones and shadows. The Bible speaks of the Nephilim, mighty men of renown who lived before the flood. Norse sagas tell of Jutnar, colossal beings at odds with the gods. In Native American traditions, the Paiute recount red-haired giants called the Si-Te-Ka, fierce cannibals who were eventually defeated and burned in a cave. Such tales are remarkably widespread, echoing across cultures that never met, as if humanity carries a collective memory of outsized ancestors. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, American newspapers frequently reported the discovery of giant skeletons, bones unearthed in burial mounds, sometimes said to measure 7, 8, or even 10 feet tall. One famous account from 1877 described a skeleton over 8 feet long found in Eureka, Nevada. Another report from Wisconsin told of elongated skulls and oversized bones buried in ceremonial mounds. While most of these finds have been dismissed as exaggerations, misidentified remains, or outright fabrications, the sheer volume of reports stirred fascination. Scholars still debate whether there was ever a kernel of truth behind the giant craze of that era, or whether it was simply the product of hoaxes and sensational journalism. Mainstream science does recognize that gigantism occurs, a rare condition caused by hormonal imbalances, leading individuals to grow exceptionally tall. Skeletal remains of unusually tall people have been documented throughout history, yet these are exceptions, not races of giants. The tallest confirmed human, Robert Wadlow of Illinois, reached 8 feet 11 inches in the 20th century. But fringe theorists point to mound-building cultures, megalithic monuments, and oral traditions as signs that entire groups of airy stature may once have existed, their traces now suppressed or forgotten. Another curious case emerges from Lovelock Cave in Nevada. Excavations there in the early 1900s uncovered artifacts of the Paiute's enemies, the Si-Te-Ka, woven sandals, tools, and bones. Some early reports claimed unusually large skeletal remains were among the finds, though official records emphasize more mundane dimensions. Still, the legend endures, and fringe researchers maintain that the cave may once have housed the remains of giants wiped out by early peoples. Scholars still debate whether the Lovelock story reflects folklore overlaid on ordinary archaeological discoveries, or whether something stranger lurks in the blurred line between myth and excavation. Elsewhere, enormous footprints carved in stone attract attention. In South Africa, a granite slab known as the Goliath's footprint shows what appears to be a giant human print over 4 feet long. Geologists argue it is a natural erosion feature, not evidence of colossal beings. Yet its uncanny resemblance to a footprint keeps it alive in fringe circles. Similar impressions are reported in Texas and other locales, some now dismissed as hoaxes, but once hotly debated. Why do these tales of giants persist? Perhaps because they dramatize a truth about our own ancestors, that the past was inhabited by people different enough from us to feel mythical. Neanderthals, for instance, were shorter but far more robust, with immense strength. The Denisovans, whose DNA still lingers in us, are only dimly known but may have been physically imposing. In evolutionary terms, we did share the planet with others, and their memory may have become amplified into legend. The stories of lost giants, whether fact or fancy, remind us how fragile the line is between archaeology and mythology. Bones crumble, records vanish, but stories endure. And in those stories lies a haunting suggestion that our world may once have been shared with beings larger, stronger, and stranger than ourselves, giants whose echoes still walk the edges of our imagination. The OOPArts. Across dusty dig sites and coal mines, in caves and quarries, there are occasional reports of artifacts that seem out of place, objects embedded in strata far older than humanity, discoveries that defy the neat timeline of history. They are called OOPArts, out-of-place artifacts. Some are dismissed as hoaxes, others as misinterpretations, but together they form a gallery of curiosities that invite us to wonder, what if they are whispers of forgotten ages? One of the most famous is the so-called London hammer, found in Texas in 1936. A hammer with a metal head and wooden handle appeared encased in a concretion of rock, which some claimed dated to more than 100 million years ago. Mainstream geologists argue that the concretion is not ancient bedrock, but a relatively recent formation of minerals around a dropped hammer. Yet fringe voices see it as evidence of tool-wielding hands long before ours. Scholars still debate whether the hammer is an odd geological accident or a genuine anomaly. In 1889, miners near Morrisonville, Illinois, reported discovering a small chain embedded in coal. Other accounts speak of nails, vases, and even carved stones pulled from seams tens of millions of years old. Most of these stories never survive close scrutiny. Coal mines are messy places, with cracks and intrusions that can trap modern debris, later cemented by mineral deposits. But the persistence of such reports reveals a deeper hunger, the sense that the past may hold surprises that orthodox timelines cannot explain. There are also more enduring enigmas. The so-called Coso artifact, discovered in California in 1961, appeared to be a spark plug encased in geode-like stone. Initial excitement suggested a machine part from prehistory. Later analysis showed it likely was a 1920s spark plug encrusted by minerals, a mundane object mistaken for mystery. Yet the story spreads widely, becoming part of OOPArt lore. Some artifacts, however, remain intriguing, even under scrutiny. The Baghdad battery, a clay jar with a copper cylinder and iron rod, found near modern Baghdad, dates to around 200 BCE. While mainstream scholars see it as a storage vessel, some argue it could generate a small electric charge, perhaps used for electroplating. If true, it suggests a technological leap we had not credited to that age. Scholars still debate whether it was truly a battery or simply a jar whose modern resemblance to technology misleads us. Equally puzzling are the Nazca skulls and metallic spheres from South Africa called Klerksdorp spheres, with grooves that seem too precise to be natural. Geologists classify them as natural mineral formations, products of sediment and pressure. Fringe thinkers insist their symmetry betrays intelligent design. Once again, interpretation depends on perspective, nature's artistry or human handiwork. What unites all OOPArts is less their authenticity than their symbolism. They serve as reminders of the gaps in our knowledge, the spaces where imagination takes hold. Even if most are errors or hoaxes, their very existence shows how fragile our confidence in history can be. Scholars still debate whether dismissing them outright risks ignoring genuine anomalies, or whether entertaining them risks diluting science with fantasy. In the end, OOPArts live in the twilight between geology and story. They may not prove that advanced civilizations thrived in prehistory, but they echo a truth already clear. The past is far stranger and far less complete than we imagine. Each artifact, whether real or false, becomes a metaphor, an out-of-place reminder that our timeline may be less linear and more mysterious than the textbooks suggest. Atlantis remembered? Few stories have endured with such tenacity as that of Atlantis. First told by the philosopher Plato around 360 BCE, the tale describes a great island empire beyond the Pillars of Hercules that was larger than Libya and Asia combined. Atlantis, he said, was rich in resources, adorned with grand temples, and ruled by powerful kings descended from the god Poseidon. But its people grew arrogant, turning away from virtue. In punishment, the gods sent earthquakes and floods, and Atlantis sank beneath the sea in a single day and night. Mainstream scholars view Plato's account as allegory, a parable about the dangers of hubris. It appears only in two of his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, and nowhere else in Greek literature. Likely, they argue, he crafted it to illustrate his philosophical ideals of the perfect state versus the corrupt one. But even as allegory, the story has a haunting specificity, detailed geography, concentric canals, and exact measurements. Scholars still debate whether Plato based his account on an older tale, perhaps drawn from Egyptian records he claimed to have consulted, or whether he invented it entirely. For centuries, seekers have searched for the lost city. In the Renaissance, explorers looked to the Americas, imagining Atlantis as the cradle of pre-Columbian civilizations. In the 19th century, Ignatius Donnelly's book, Atlantis, the Antediluvian World, argued that it was the source of all ancient knowledge, from Egyptian pyramids to Mayan temples. More recently, theories have placed Atlantis everywhere from the Azores to the Caribbean, from Spain's coast to Antarctica. None has produced definitive evidence, but the allure persists. Part of the fascination lies in how Atlantis echoes other traditions. Flood myths, as we saw earlier, speak of civilizations erased by water. The Aztec legend of Aztlan, a homeland across the Essis, Ea, bears a curious resemblance in name and theme. In Hindu texts, great cities are said to have been swallowed by the ocean. These parallels suggest that Plato's tale, allegory or not, resonates with a broader human memory of cataclysm and loss. Some researchers link Atlantis to the eruption of Thera, Santorini, around 1600 BCE, one of the most violent volcanic events in recorded history. The Minoan civilization on Crete was devastated, its palaces and fleets destroyed. To the Greeks, this disaster may have seeded myths of a drowned, once great culture. Others argue for Troy, Tartessos in Spain, or even Doggerland in the North Sea as possible inspirations. Each theory reflects a blend of geology, archaeology, and imagination. Scholars still debate whether Atlantis points to a specific event or is merely the archetype of a lost golden age. Fringe interpretations push further. Some claim Atlantis was the seat of a technologically advanced civilization, with machines, energy sources, even flying craft, legends preserved in esoteric writings. Others see it as evidence of cyclical time, with humanity rising and falling through ages, Atlantis as only the last to vanish. While these claims lack evidence, they reflect a powerful yearning that our story is older and richer than we know. Perhaps Atlantis endures because it embodies both hope and warning. It is the dream of a civilization so advanced it seems godlike, and the nightmare of that same civilization undone by arrogance. Whether allegory, memory, or myth, it reminds us that greatness is fragile, that the sea can reclaim what hubris builds. As we stand on our own fragile shores, the story of Atlantis feels less like ancient fantasy and more like a mirror, reflecting what might be lost should our own civilization meet the same fate. South American enigmas. Across the high plateaus and deserts of South America, stone and sand preserve mysteries that have long defied simple explanations. Here, cultures flourished with astonishing skill, creating monuments and designs that continue to inspire wonder. Yet in their precision and purpose, some believe they hint at deeper, older legacies, knowledge inherited from civilizations far earlier than we imagine. The Nazca Desert of Peru holds one of the world's great enigmas, vast geoglyphs etched into the earth between 500 BCE and 500 CE. These Nazca lines, stretching for miles, depict hummingbirds, monkeys, spiders, and geometric patterns so immense that they are best seen from the air. Mainstream archaeology interprets them as ritual pathways, perhaps linked to water and fertility cults. Some suggest they align with astronomical events, though consensus remains elusive. Fringe thinkers propose they were runways for ancient aircraft or messages to gods from a forgotten age. Scholars still debate whether their true purpose was practical, symbolic, or cosmic in nature. Further south, at the site of Tiwanaku near Lake Titicaca in Bolivia, monumental ruins rise over 12,000 feet above sea level. The Acapana Pyramid, the Kalasasaya Temple, and the famous Gateway of the Sun are constructed from massive stone blocks, some weighing over 100 tons. The precision of their joints, with interlocking cuts and smooth surfaces, has sparked endless speculation. Mainstream views hold that Tiwanaku thrived between 500 and 1000 CE, a ceremonial hub for a complex culture. but some argue that the weathered stones are far older, remnants of a civilization predating the Inca by millennia. One particularly puzzling feature is Pumapunku, a section of Tiwanaku filled with H-shaped blocks carved with geometric accuracy. Their cuts are so sharp and their angles so exact that modern alchemists marvel at the craftsmanship. How were such forms achieved with stone tools, without metal saws or diamond drills? Archaeologists suggest a combination of skill, patience, and abrasive sand techniques. Yet, fringe theorists see in them the fingerprints of lost technology. Scholars still debate whether Pumapunku's blocks reflect extraordinary pre-Columbian ingenuity or something that hints at knowledge now lost. Legends among the Andean peoples speak of Viracocha, a bearded culture bringer who arrived after a great flood, teaching arts and order before departing across the sea. In him, some see echoes of global myths, civilizing figures who appear after cataclysm, restoring knowledge. Could Tiwanaku, with its enigmatic stones, have been a stage for such a memory? Or is this simply the natural pattern of myth, arising wherever people confront the mystery of origins? The Andes also conceal practical marvels. The Inca, inheritors of earlier traditions, engineered terraced fields and stonework so resilient that their walls have withstood earthquakes that levelled modern buildings. Machu Picchu, often romanticized as a lost city, reflects this mastery. Built around 1450, abandoned after the Spanish conquest, then hidden until its rediscovery in 1911. Though firmly within historical timelines, it reminds us how quickly civilizations can vanish, their works swallowed by jungle, their stories nearly forgotten. South America's enigmas, whether the Nazca lines traced across desert plains or the megaliths of Tiwanaku weathering in the high Andes, speak to the ingenuity of ancient peoples. But they also feed speculation about deeper layers of history. Scholars still debate whether these feats were wholly the product of the cultures we know, or whether they rest on foundations laid by predecessors whose names and stories have already been lost to time. Standing before these vast works, one feels both reverence and curiosity. The stones do not lie, but they also do not explain themselves. They leave us to wonder whether South America's enigmas are remarkable chapters of known history, or faint echoes of civilizations that came before, erased by time yet immortalized in stone and story. Megalithic precision, all across the globe stand stones so massive, so perfectly placed, that they seem to defy the limits of ancient engineering. Megalithic monuments, giant constructions of stone, have become symbols of mystery, testaments to both human determination and the enigma of forgotten skill. From the windswept moors of England to the sun-baked plateaus of Lebanon, they raise the same haunting question: how did ancient people, with simple tools, shape and move stones that challenge even modern machinery? Stonehenge in England, built around 3000 to 2000 BCE, is perhaps the most famous. Its standing sarsen stones weigh up to 25 tons, while smaller blue stones were transported from Wales, nearly 150 miles away. Archaeologists argue this was achieved with sledges, ropes, and rafts. Yet the precision of the circle and its astronomical alignments to solstices and lunar cycles show a sophistication far beyond crude superstition. Scholars still debate whether Stonehenge was primarily a temple, a burial ground, or an ancient observatory. Far larger feats await elsewhere. At Baalbek in Lebanon, the Roman temple complex incorporates stones of staggering size. The stone of the pregnant woman, still lying in its quarry, weighs over 1,000 tons. Nearby, 3 blocks known as the Trilithon, each weighing about 800 tons, were fitted seamlessly into the temple's foundation. Even with cranes and heavy trucks, moving such stones today would be a monumental task. Mainstream historians credit Roman engineering genius, pointing to levers, rollers, and manpower. Yet some suspect the Romans inherited older foundations, built by a civilization capable of moving stones on a scale we can scarcely replicate. In Peru, the fortress of Sacsayhuaman above Cusco stuns visitors with its polygonal walls. Massive blocks, some over 100 tons, are fitted together so precisely that even a knife blade cannot slip between them. No mortar holds them. Instead, each stone was painstakingly shaped to lock into its neighbours like a three-dimensional puzzle. Earthquakes that shattered modern buildings left these walls unscathed, a testimony to ancient seismic wisdom. Scholars still debate how such precise shaping was achieved with stone tools, and whether techniques have been lost. Puma Punku, which we encountered earlier, represents the pinnacle of this mystery. Its H-shaped stones, drilled holes, and perfectly flat surfaces suggest techniques beyond pounding with hammers and chisels. Some archaeologists argue that patience and abrasive sand grinding explain it, while fringe voices imagine advanced tools now vanished. Whether human craftsmanship or relics of a deeper past, the effect is the same, a sense of awe at the precision embedded in stone. Even Easter Island, far across the Pacific, joins the chorus. The Moai statues, weighing up to 80 tons, were carved and transported across rugged terrain by Polynesians around 1200 CE. Experimental archaeology shows it could be done with ropes, rocking the statues forward like walking giants. But the sheer labour involved, on an isolated island, reminds us of humanity's capacity for feats that appear impossible until proven otherwise. These megaliths, scattered yet united, whisper of a global impulse to create works of stone that endure beyond generations, beyond memory. They also highlight the fragility of our understanding. Scholars still debate whether such precision was born of sheer human ingenuity, or whether we underestimate the engineering traditions of peoples we too quickly call primitive. Fringe theorists take it further, proposing lost technologies, or knowledge passed down from civilizations erased by time. What is undeniable is the message carved into granite and basalt, that human beings, whether alone or inheriting lost legacies, were capable of extraordinary precision. Each block, each joint, each towering stone stands as an open question, inviting us to marvel at what was achieved and to wonder what may have been forgotten. The forgotten Amazon. When most imagine the Amazon rainforest, they think of unbroken wilderness, endless green, teeming with life, untouched by human hands until recent centuries. For a long time, that was the prevailing view, that the jungle was too dense, its soils too poor, to support large, complex societies. But in recent decades, the Earth has begun to reveal another story, one that challenges our assumptions about where civilization could flourish. Beneath the canopy, archaeologists have uncovered vast networks of ancient earthworks, geoglyphs carved into the ground in geometric patterns, circles, squares, and star-like designs. In Acre State, Brazil, more than 450 such formations have been documented, some spanning hundreds of feet across. They are dated to between 2,000 and 650 years ago, meaning they predate the arrival of Europeans, yet were already abandoned when first seen by settlers. Unlike the Nazca lines of Peru, which are scraped into desert soil, these Amazonian geoglyphs were built by removing layers of earth and arranging ditches and embankments, hinting at large coordinated populations. Scholars still debate whether these were ceremonial spaces, fortifications, or markers of social organization. Beyond the geoglyphs, evidence of managed landscapes emerges. Terra Preta, or Amazonian dark earth, appears across wide swathes of the basin, soils enriched by charcoal, bone and compost, deliberately engineered to remain fertile for centuries. Such practices suggest sustained agriculture, supporting large populations. Satellite imagery now reveals traces of grid-like settlements, ancient roads, and even possible causeways hidden beneath the forest. These findings suggest that the Amazon was not a pristine wilderness, but a human-shaped environment, nurtured by complex societies that have since disappeared. Historical accounts echo this. Early Spanish explorers like Francisco de Orellana, who navigated the Amazon in 1542, described vast cities and dense populations along the riverbanks. Later visitors found nothing but jungle, leading scholars to dismiss Orellana's tales as exaggeration. Yet modern evidence suggests he may have been telling the truth. Disease, brought by Europeans, likely decimated indigenous populations within decades, allowing the forest to reclaim fields, roads, and villages so thoroughly that even memory faded. The scale of Amazonian civilization is still debated. Some researchers estimate that millions of people may have lived in the basin before European contact, organizing themselves into complex chiefdoms. Others caution that while evidence of settlement is undeniable, the scale may have been more regional. Scholars still debate whether we should speak of civilizations in the Amazon or a patchwork of societies whose combined impact reshaped the forest itself. Fringe interpretations push the boundaries further. Some claim that the geometric earthworks and vast settlements suggest influence from a far older culture, one that thrived in the Amazon long before known history. They point to myths of El Dorado, the fabled golden city hidden in the jungle, as possible echoes of real grandeur. While such claims lack definitive proof, they resonate with the broader theme that our picture of the past is incomplete and that even the densest forests may conceal forgotten chapters. The Amazon reminds us that civilizations need not be built of stone to matter. Their temples may have been earthen mounds, their legacies woven into soil rather than granite. Unlike pyramids or megaliths, they vanish quickly when abandoned, leaving only faint imprints in the ground. Yet those imprints, revealed by satellites and shovels, challenge the long-standing myth of untouched wilderness. They show us that humans had long shaped even the most forbidding environments, and that entire worlds can vanish beneath the trees, waiting centuries to be rediscovered. Sumerian records. In the Fertile Crescent between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the world's first written records emerged more than 5,000 years ago. The Sumerians etched their lives into clay tablets with wedge-shaped cuneiform marks, lists of goods, hymns to gods, laws, and myths. Among these tablets lies something stranger still, the Sumerian King List, a document that claims rulers reigned for tens of thousands of years before the flood. The King List, preserved in multiple copies dating back to around 2100 BCE, begins with antediluvian kings whose reigns stretch impossibly long, 28,800 years for Alulim of Eridu, 36,000 years for his successor Alalngar. After the flood, reigns shrink to centuries, then decades, and finally more human lifespans. Mainstream scholars interpret these immense numbers as symbolic, perhaps exaggerations, to link rulers with divine authority. Yet others wonder if the text preserves a distorted memory of real dynasties from a forgotten age. Scholars still debate whether the King List is pure mythology, political propaganda, or a hybrid of myth and history. Beyond the King List, Sumerian myths themselves whisper of earlier times. The tale of Atrahasis describes a great flood sent by the gods, survived by a chosen man who builds a boat, centuries before the story of Noah. The gods themselves, the Anunnaki, are depicted as beings who bestowed civilization, teaching agriculture, writing, and law. To the Sumerians, these figures were divine patrons. But fringe theorists interpret them differently, suggesting they were memories of advanced culture bringers, perhaps even non-human. While such interpretations lack mainstream support, they highlight how deeply the Sumerians linked their origins to forces beyond themselves. The Sumerians were not alone in extending history beyond measure. In Egypt, the Turin king list includes reigns of gods and sars, spirits of the dead stretching thousands of years before human pharaohs. In India, the Puranas describe dynasties lasting tens of thousands of years. Across cultures, early records expand human history into mythical time, where rulers lived for spans that defy biology. Scholars still debate whether these immense ages were symbolic, mnemonic, or rooted in oral traditions of a world erased by catastrophe. Archaeological fact grounds the mystery. The city of Uruk, by 3000 BCE, boasted monumental temples, a population of tens of thousands, and the world's first known writing system. This alone is a staggering achievement, but what if Uruk was not the beginning, but a rebirth? The king list insists there was a first time before the flood, when kingship descended from heaven to Eridu. Could this be cultural memory of an earlier civilization, wiped out and reborn in Mesopotamia's fertile plains? Fringe authors point to the advanced knowledge encoded in Sumerian tablets, accurate lunar calendars, advanced mathematics based on a sexagesimal base 60 system, and myths describing the structure of the cosmos. To mainstream historians, these are natural achievements of a brilliant culture. To others, they feel like remnants of something inherited, knowledge older than the cities themselves. Scholars still debate whether such sudden sophistication can be explained purely as independent invention, or whether fragments of older traditions influence the Sumerians. Standing among the broken tablets in museums, we are reminded that writing itself is fragile. Most texts are lost, washed away in floods, burned in wars, dissolved in soil. What survives is a fraction of a fraction, and even within that, hints of impossibly ancient kings and divine teachers linger. Whether myth or history, exaggeration or memory, the Sumerian records extend the boundaries of human imagination. They invite us to consider that our story may have chapters erased, leaving behind only cryptic lines scratched into clay, rulers who reigned for millennia, floods that swept away worlds, and gods who walked among mortals in an age before history began. Genetic breadcrumbs. If stones and myths leave us guessing, DNA provides a different kind of record, one written not in carvings or clay, but in the code of life itself. In recent decades, advances in genetics have begun to illuminate deep history, revealing encounters and mysteries invisible to archaeology. Yet even here, the trail sometimes grows strange, hinting at shadows of forgotten ancestors who shaped us before disappearing. Mainstream science has already uncovered surprises. In 2010, the sequencing of a tiny finger bone from Denisova Cave in Siberia revealed an entirely new species of human, the Denisovans. Neither Neanderthal nor modern human, they were a distinct branch of our family tree, known only through fragments of bone and DNA. Astonishingly, their genetic legacy lives on. Modern Melanesian and Australian Aboriginal populations carry up to 5% Denisovan DNA. Without that bone, we would never have known they existed. Scholars still debate how widespread Denisovans were, and how many more unknown hominins might be hidden in our genetic code. Even more intriguing are ghost lineages. In West Africa, studies of DNA suggest the presence of ancestry from an unidentified archaic human population, one not represented by any known fossil. Similarly, certain stretches of our genome appear older than Homo sapiens itself, hinting at interbreeding with hominins we have not yet found. These phantom relatives complicate the neat story of out-of-Africa migration, suggesting that humanity's past is braided with encounters long forgotten. Fringe interpretations take this further. Some argue that these genetic anomalies could point not just to unknown species, but to entirely lost civilizations, peoples with knowledge and culture who vanished without a trace. Myths of first peoples and giants are sometimes woven into this framework, imagined as distorted memories of real but now extinct populations. While mainstream genetics cautions against such leaps, the idea has an undeniable allure. Scholars still debate whether we are only at the beginning of uncovering the full extent of human diversity in prehistory. Even within our own species, oddities abound. Around 2018, scientists discovered that a woman's skeleton in Siberia had a Neanderthal mother and a Denisovan father, a literal first-generation hybrid. Such discoveries remind us how entangled our origins are, how easily entire branches of our family could vanish while leaving traces in us. In this sense, we ourselves are living archives, carriers of lost histories written into our chromosomes. Genetics also preserves whispers of ancient migrations. Polynesians, for example, show genetic links to indigenous South Americans, suggesting contact across the Pacific centuries before European arrival. Native American genomes carry traces of a Siberian population known as the Malta people, who lived 24,000 years ago. These findings show that human contact, even in deep time, was broader and stranger than once believed. And yet, genetics also raises unsettling questions. If we can find DNA from vanished hominins in ourselves, what else might be hidden? How many species rose and fell without leaving bones behind? Their only legacy, the faint signals in our blood. How many stories of civilizations, however small or brief, are encoded in patterns we do not yet understand? Scholars still debate whether we will ever fully reconstruct this past, or whether much of it is destined to remain invisible. Genetic breadcrumbs remind us that we are not alone, and never were. We are the sum of many peoples, some remembered, most forgotten. Our DNA is like a palimpsest manuscript, erased and rewritten across millennia, yet retaining faint traces of every hand that touched it. And like myths and ruins, it tempts us with a humbling possibility, that humanity's story is not one of straight ascent, but of tangled branches, vanished kin, and civilizations whose only remaining monuments are carried silently within our very cells. Cycles of time. In many of the world's oldest traditions, history is not a straight line, but a circle, a succession of ages, rising and falling, repeating endlessly. Nowhere is this vision more elaborately expressed than in Hindu cosmology. The texts describe vast cycles called yugas, in which humanity passes from a golden age of virtue into darker epochs of decline. The Satya Yuga lasts 1.7 million years, an age of truth and harmony. Treta and Dvapara Yugas follow, shorter and more corrupt. Finally comes Kali Yuga, the present age, an age of strife, materialism and decay. When it ends, the cycle begins again, renewed by cosmic destruction and rebirth. Mainstream scholars interpret such timescales symbolically. They argue that the staggering numbers in Hindu texts reflect myth, not chronology. Yet the concept of cyclical history appears in many cultures. The Maya described world ages, each ending in cataclysm. The Greeks spoke of golden, silver, bronze and iron ages, echoing a decline from perfection to hardship. Even Norse mythology envisions Ragnarok, the destruction and rebirth of the world. Scholars still debate whether these cycles are purely allegorical or whether they preserve faint memories of real collapses, ice ages, floods, or volcanic winters that repeatedly reset humanity's progress. What makes these traditions compelling is not just their similarity, but their resonance with what we see in the archaeological record. Civilizations do rise and fall in cycles. The Sumerians gave way to Babylonians, the Maya collapsed into jungle, Rome fell and was remembered in fragments. From the perspective of deep time, even the greatest empires are transient, their monuments eroded, their knowledge forgotten. The cyclical myths, though exaggerated in scale, may reflect an intuitive recognition of this reality, that nothing endures forever. Fringe thinkers suggest a more radical interpretation that these cycles may encode real memories of civilizations predating our own. In the Hindu yugas, the long ages before Kali Yuga could be read as epochs when advanced societies thrived, erased by catastrophe before ours began. Plato's tale of Atlantis fits neatly into such a framework, a lost age destroyed, followed by rebirth. Could the myths of cycles be more than metaphor? Scholars still debate whether to take them as symbolic philosophy or veiled history carried through oral tradition. Modern science adds another layer. Geological records do show periodic catastrophes, ice ages repeating every 100,000 years, mass extinctions tied to volcanic eruptions or asteroid impacts. The Younger Dryas, about 12,900 years ago, was a sudden return to glacial cold, possibly triggered by a cosmic impact. Such events would have shattered early human societies, forcing them to rebuild anew. In this sense, the myths of cycles may indeed echo real rhythms of Earth itself, moments when the slate was wiped clean. Our own time too reveals fragility. We imagine progress as linear, yet history shows how easily it falters. The fall of Rome plunged Europe into centuries of fragmentation. The collapse of the Bronze Age around 1200 BCE erased literacy and cities across the Mediterranean, reducing complex societies to small villages. If such declines can occur in centuries, how much more could vanish in millennia? The myths remind us not to assume permanence, but to see ourselves as part of repeating patterns. Perhaps that is their greatest lesson. Whether symbolic or historical, the cycles of time place humanity in a humbler frame. We are not the inevitable pinnacle of history, but one age among many, destined like all before us to fade and be forgotten. And just as ancient peoples imagine new dawns after destruction, we too may someday be remembered only faintly as whispers in the myths of those who come after. Ice Age survivors. At the close of the last Ice Age, around 12,000 years ago, Earth was in upheaval. Glaciers that had covered vast swaths of North America and Eurasia melted with startling speed. Seas rose more than 300 feet, drowning coastlines where humans surely lived. Torrents of meltwater carved new valleys and reshaped rivers. In this shifting landscape, cultures that had endured for millennia were forced to move, adapt, or vanish. If any early civilizations existed then, they may have been swept away, their traces hidden beneath silt or submerged far offshore. Mainstream archaeology paints this period as the end of the Paleolithic, when hunter-gatherers transitioned toward farming and villages. Evidence from places like Jericho, one of the world's oldest continuously inhabited settlements, shows small communities beginning to plant crops around 9000 BCE. But the suddenness of environmental change raises questions. Could some groups have been more advanced, their knowledge and structures erased in the chaos? Scholars still debate how quickly humanity adapted and whether we underestimate the sophistication of Ice Age societies. Myths across the world recall survivors of great floods and cataclysms who carried knowledge forward. In Mesopotamia, Utnapishtim rebuilds civilization after the deluge. In Central America, the Maya speak of successive worlds destroyed and renewed, with survivors tasked to begin anew. The Hopi remember clans led underground to survive catastrophe, later emerging to repopulate the surface. These stories often include culture bringers, figures who teach farming, astronomy, and laws to scattered survivors, as though remnants of a shattered civilization carried wisdom into the new age. Fringe interpretations suggest that the sudden rise of agriculture and monumental building after the Ice Age may reflect not independent invention, but a memory of older traditions revived by survivors. Göbekli Tepe, with its massive pillars dated to around 9600 BCE, appears almost immediately after the Younger Dryas cooling ended. Could it have been founded by Ice Age survivors, preserving knowledge from a time before the flood? Scholars still debate whether this leap was an isolated burst of innovation or part of a deeper continuity stretching back into prehistory. There are also tantalizing anomalies. Off the coast of Cuba, sonar surveys in 2001 reported submerged structures in patterns resembling pyramids and roads, more than 2,000 feet beneath the sea. While the findings remain unverified and controversial, if authentic, they would suggest settlements built long before sea levels rose to their modern heights. Similarly, ruins off India's Gulf of Kambat suggest urban-like structures dating back nearly 9500 BCE, aligning with Hindu legends of drowned cities. Though mainstream archaeologists question these interpretations, the possibility of Ice Age cultures lost to the ocean lingers. Survivors, if they existed, would have faced immense challenges. Rising seas displaced populations, forcing migrations across continents. Mammoths and other Ice Age megafauna went extinct, altering diets and hunting strategies. Yet humans are resilient, and in adversity they innovate. The very upheaval that destroyed old ways of life may have sparked new ones: farming, herding, permanent settlement. Scholars still debate whether such innovations arose spontaneously in multiple regions, or whether they reflect shared memories carried by scattered survivors. The Ice Age reminds us of the fragility of civilization. If our world today were plunged into such upheaval, cities drowned, climates transformed, what fragments of our culture would endure? Perhaps only myths, half-remembered stories of survivors who rebuilt from ruins. In this sense, the legends of Ice Age survivors are less fantastical than they seem. They may be echoes of real human endurance, preserved in memory long after the waters rose. Catastrophe theory. The end of the Ice Age was not a gentle thaw, but a turbulent drama, punctuated by what scientists call the Younger Dryas, a sudden return to near glacial cold around 12,900 years ago. For over a millennium, temperatures plunged, megafauna vanished, and human societies struggled. Then, just as abruptly, the cold ended, ushering in the warm, stable Holocene. What caused this sharp detour in climate remains a matter of fierce debate, and at the centre of that debate lies catastrophe. Mainstream theories once favoured changes in ocean currents. As ice sheets melted, floods of fresh water may have disrupted the Atlantic conveyor, halting the northward flow of warm water and plunging the northern hemisphere into deep chill. Yet beginning in the 2000s, a bold alternative gained attention: the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. Researchers proposed that fragments of a disintegrating comet struck or exploded over Earth, igniting wildfires, destabilizing ice sheets, and triggering the sudden cold snap. Supporters point to layers of carbon-rich sediment, nanodiamonds, and microscopic spherules found across North America and Europe, signatures, they argue, of cosmic catastrophe. Scholars still debate whether these are genuine impact markers or products of earthly processes. If such an impact occurred, the consequences for early human societies would have been devastating. Forests burned, animals perished, and landscapes transformed in the space of a generation. For hunter-gatherers dependent on stable ecosystems, it would have felt like the world itself collapsing. Legends of fire from the sky and floods from melting ice may be cultural memories of this trauma, encoded in myth and ritual. Fringe voices connect this event with the sudden emergence of monumental sites like Göbekli Tepe soon afterward. They suggest survivors, traumatized by catastrophe, built temples to commemorate what was lost or to appease the heavens. Some even argue that knowledge from a destroyed Ice Age civilization was preserved in such sanctuaries. Mainstream archaeology resists this leap, but acknowledges that the timing is striking. Humanity shifted from mobile bands to settled communities in the very shadow of the Younger Dryas. Scholars still debate whether catastrophe forced this transition or merely accelerated innovations already underway. The idea of sudden disaster reshaping history was once unpopular. For much of the 20th century, uniformitarianism, the belief that slow, gradual processes explain Earth's history, dominated geology and archaeology alike. Catastrophism, tied to biblical floods and wild speculation, was unfashionable. But in the late 20th century, the impact theory for the extinction of the dinosaurs forced a re-evaluation. Suddenly, catastrophes were back on the table as legitimate drivers of change. The Younger Dryas hypothesis rides that wave of reconsideration, though it remains contentious. Even today, scholars remain divided. Some argue that the evidence for an impact is circumstantial, that climate shifts can be explained without invoking cosmic fire. Others point to the sheer scale of devastation in the record and find it difficult to explain otherwise. The debate highlights how fragile our reconstructions of deep history are, and how easily a single event can transform the trajectory of life. Catastrophe theory resonates with us because it feels both ancient and immediate. We know how fragile our own world is, how a single asteroid, eruption, or nuclear exchange could erase our progress. To imagine that earlier societies may have faced such ruin is to see ourselves reflected in them. Whether caused by ice, water, or fire from the sky, the Younger Dryas reminds us that civilization is not inevitable, it is contingent, precary. Is balanced on the whims of nature and cosmos alike. Sky watchers, long before telescopes or satellites, ancient peoples lifted their gaze to the heavens. Across continents, they tracked the movements of stars, planets, and the sun with an accuracy that still astonishes us. Why did early societies devote such care to the sky? Was it only for calendars and harvests, or did it reflect a deeper inheritance, knowledge preserved from an earlier, forgotten age? Stonehenge in England, aligned with solstices, is one of the most famous examples. On the summer solstice, the rising sun appears precisely over the heelstone, bathing the monument in light. Similarly, Newgrange in Ireland, a passage tomb over 5,000 years old, was built so that at the winter solstice, sunlight floods its inner chamber for just a few minutes. Mainstream scholars interpret these alignments as ritual observances, practical calendars marking the seasons. Yet the precision of the construction, tracking celestial events to within days over millennia, speaks of long observation and careful planning. Scholars still debate whether such sites were primarily ceremonial, agricultural, or both. Across the ocean, the Maya developed a calendar system of remarkable sophistication. Their long count tracked cycles lasting thousands of years, while their observatories, like El Caracol at Chichen Itza, were aligned to Venus, a planet of immense ritual importance. The Dresden Codex, one of the few surviving Maya books, contains tables of Venus's appearances with near-perfect accuracy. To some, this reflects centuries of naked-eye astronomy. To others, it feels like knowledge too advanced to arise in isolation. Egypt, too, was a land of sky watchers. The Great Pyramid of Giza is aligned with true north to within a fraction of a degree, an astonishing feat without modern instruments. The shafts within the pyramid point toward Orion's belt and the star Sirius, central in Egypt. Iron mythology. Temples at Karnak and Abu Simbel are oriented so that sunlight strikes specific chambers on solstices and equinoxes. Was this mere coincidence or deliberate design informed by generations of stellar study? Scholars still debate whether such alignments were symbolic, religious, or practical. Even in the Americas, evidence abounds. The ancestral Puebloans of Chaco Canyon in New Mexico constructed structures aligned with lunar cycles spanning 18.6 years, a level of precision requiring generations of observation. Petroglyphs show crescents and stars that some interpret as records of eclipses or supernovae. One carving, near the Sundagger site, aligns with shafts of light marking solstices and equinoxes on a spiral carved in stone. For a culture without writing, this integration of sky and stone is breathtaking. Fringe interpretations argue that such sophistication implies inheritance. How could scattered early societies with simple tools achieve such precision independently? Were they guided by knowledge passed down from an earlier civilization, perhaps one erased at the end of the Ice Age? Skeptics counter that patient observation over centuries can achieve extraordinary results, and that humans everywhere had reason to track the heavens. Yet the sense of connection lingers, the same constellations watched over us all, inspiring monuments that endure. The sky itself holds memory. Ancient Chinese astronomers recorded comets, eclipses, and novae centuries before telescopes, many confirmed by modern science. Babylonian tablets inscribed planetary positions with such accuracy that they inform present-day astronomical models. These records, mainstream or fringe, suggest that human fascination with the heavens is as old as civilization itself, perhaps older. Skywatchers remind us that ancient people were not primitive stargazers, but careful scientists in their own right, embedding knowledge into stone, myth, and ritual. Whether this knowledge was independently gained or inherited from forgotten forerunners, it remains one of humanity's greatest legacies: to look upward, to measure, to wonder, and to inscribe the rhythms of the cosmos into the bones of the earth. Sound and stone. Across the world's ancient monuments, there are places where stone seems to sing. Whispers of forgotten acoustics appear in temples, tombs, and amphitheatres, where the interplay of architecture and sound creates effects that border on the uncanny. Did early builders stumble upon these resonances by accident, or did they inherit a deeper knowledge of acoustics, now mostly forgotten? One of the most striking examples lies in Chavin de Huanta, a ceremonial complex in the Peruvian Andes dating to around 1200 BCE. Within its labyrinth of tunnels, conch shell trumpets have been found, their eerie tones designed to echo and reverberate through the stone corridors. Archaeologists suggest that initiates, plunged into darkness and bombarded by resonant sounds, experienced altered states during rituals. Mainstream views see this as psychological theatre, a way to invoke awe and authority. Fringe voices argue that the precision of these resonances hints at a sophisticated understanding of acoustics. Scholars still debate whether the effects were incidental or deliberately engineered. In Malta, the Hypogeum of Hal Saflieni, an underground temple over 5,000 years old, has a chamber known as the Oracle Room. A voice speaking there resonates powerfully at around 110 Hz, producing a hypnotic effect felt throughout the complex. Experiments show that such frequencies can influence brain activity, potentially inducing trance-like states. Was this an accident of architecture or intentional design? The debate continues, but the effect itself is undeniable. The stone amplifies the voice as though alive. Egypt's temples, too, seem built with sound in mind. The Great Pyramid contains the King's Chamber, constructed of granite blocks that resonate when struck, producing deep, bell-like tones. Some researchers propose this was incidental, a byproduct of material and geometry. Others speculate it may have been intentional, enhancing chants or rituals. Ancient texts describe music and incantation as central to temple practice. Scholars still debate whether the builders deliberately tuned their monuments to resonate with human voices and instruments. The Greeks formalized such knowledge in amphitheatres like Epidaurus, where whispers on stage can be heard clearly by thousands in the seats. This is no accident. The design harnesses reflections of sound waves, creating perfect acoustics without modern amplification. If the Greeks mastered this by 400 BCE, might earlier cultures, lacking written records, have also known how to shape sound with stone? Fringe theories push further. Some suggest that megalithic sites such as Stonehenge function as acoustic instruments, amplifying drumming and chanting. Tests at reconstructed stone circles show enhanced resonance, producing low-frequency vibrations that can alter human perception. Others speculate about sonic levitation, the idea that ancient cultures used sound to move massive stones. While this lacks empirical evidence, it reflects the deep association between sound and mystery in the ancient imagination. Legends echo this theme. In Tibet, tales describe monks using chants and horns to lift stones into place, though no verifiable record supports it. In Ireland, myths speak of druids whose voices carried magical power. The universal link between sound and the sacred suggests that acoustics were not merely entertainment, but portals to altered states, communication with gods, or even the manipulation of matter itself. Modern science recognizes the profound effect of resonance. Certain frequencies can shatter glass or vibrate structures into collapse. Others can synchronize brainwaves, influence mood, or heal. It is not far-fetched to imagine that ancient builders, through long experimentation, discovered these effects and encoded them in their monuments. Scholars still debate whether such knowledge was empirical, symbolic, or inherited from deeper traditions now lost. Sound and stone remind us that ancient architecture was not only visual but experiential. These spaces were designed to be felt as much as seen, resonating with voice, drum, and chant. Whether by accident or design, they hint at a forgotten science, one where vibration was sacred, and where stone itself seemed to hum with the mysteries of creation, engineering ghosts. Throughout history, human ingenuity has produced marvels that later slipped from memory, technologies once mastered, then lost for centuries or millennia. These engineering ghosts remind us that progress is not always linear, and that the tools of vanished civilizations may fade so completely that rediscovery feels like invention rather than return. They also raise the question, how much knowledge might have disappeared entirely, leaving us with only fragments and whispers? Consider Roman concrete. Structures like the Colosseum and aqueducts endure not just for centuries but for millennia, while modern concrete often crumbles within decades. In 2017, researchers discovered that Roman builders mixed volcanic ash and lime, which interacted with seawater to create a self-healing concrete that grew stronger over time. Yet after Rome fell, the recipe was lost. Medieval builders lacked it, and only now are we relearning its secrets. Scholars still debate whether other advanced materials may have existed in antiquity, now forgotten because they did not survive in written form. Damascus steel is another ghost. From around 900 CE, swordsmiths in the Middle East produced blades renowned for their sharpness, strength, and wavy surface patterns. They could slice silk mid-air, bend without breaking, and hold an edge like no other. By the 18th century, however, the technique was lost. Modern metallurgists eventually discovered that the steel contained carbon nanotube-like structures, formed through a delicate process of forging and cooling. Without precise knowledge of ores and methods, the craft vanished, leaving legends of swords that outperformed modern alloys. The Greeks, too, left their spectral marvels. Beyond the Antikythera mechanism, they invented steam engines, albeit small ones, like Hero of Alexandria's Aeolipile in the 1st century CE. It spun using heated steam, a prototype of industrial power that would not be harnessed again for nearly 1,500 years. What if such inventions had been nurtured rather than forgotten? How differently might history have unfolded? Scholars still debate whether technological stagnation reflects bad luck, cultural priorities, or the collapse of civilizations that once safeguarded such knowledge. In the Americas, the engineering of the Inca also speaks of ghosts. They devised suspension bridges of woven grass capable of spanning deep gorges, maintained by annual renewal. They built roads thousands of miles long across mountains, with drainage systems that survive today, yet without writing, their methods were never fully recorded, and much of their knowledge perished with conquest. Even the simple wheel offers an ironic lesson. Known in Mesopotamia by 3500 BCE, it was never adopted by the Inca, who instead perfected road networks and relay runners. Technology, it seems, is not inevitable. It can be discovered, lost, or bypassed entirely. This fragility opens space for speculation. How many tools, machines, or methods once existed in prehistory, erased by time, leaving only legends of gods and heroes? Fringe thinkers often argue that myths of magic may conceal memories of forgotten technologies. Flying chariots, thunderbolts, or staffs of power may not have been divine, but misunderstood devices passed down in distorted memory. Mainstream scholars see these as symbolic, yet acknowledge that oral traditions can encode real knowledge in mythic form. Scholars still debate whether tales of vanished wonders should be read as allegory or faint echoes of genuine lost practices. The ghosts of engineering remind us of the impermanence of knowledge. Even in our modern age, a sudden collapse could erase much of our technical lore within generations. Books burn, hard drives decay, servers go dark. If this happened once, twice, or many times before, how much could have been lost to us? The ruins we admire may not be all that remains, but merely what survived, while countless other marvels dissolved into the silence of history. Mythic teachers. Across cultures and continents, stories endure of strangers who appeared in times of chaos, bringing knowledge that reshaped the world. They are often described as tall, pale-skinned, or bearded figures, arriving after floods or disasters, teaching agriculture, architecture, astronomy, and laws. Were these simply mythic archetypes, divine messengers invented to explain sudden leaps in culture, or memories of real survivors carrying fragments of lost civilizations? In Mesoamerica, the god Quetzalcoatl stands out. Depicted as a feathered serpent, he was also said to take human form, a bearded man who arrived after Catastrophe, teaching people to plant maize, measure the heavens, and live by moral codes. Eventually, he departed across the sea, promising to return. When the Spanish arrived in the 16th century, some Aztecs even believed Cortés was Quetzalcoatl returned, though this interpretation is debated. Mainstream scholars see Quetzalcoatl as myth woven into political theology, but fringe theorists argue he may reflect memory of a real figure or group of culture bringers. Scholars still debate whether his legend is purely symbolic or rooted in distant history. In the Andes, a similar figure appears, Viracocha. He too was a bearded man of great stature, emerging after a flood to teach crafts, agriculture, and laws. He wandered among the people before vanishing westward across the Pacific. At Tiwanaku, near Lake Titicaca, statues and carvings are said to depict him. To the Inca and their predecessors, he was the great civilizer, the one who turned chaos into order. The resemblance to Quetzalcoatl is striking, despite the vast distance between cultures. The Pacific echoes with related themes. Polynesian myths speak of godlike navigators who taught star maps and ocean routes, guiding canoes across thousands of miles. In Sumer, the Apkallu were 7 Sag, heirs sent by the gods to instruct humanity in arts and knowledge before the Great Flood. In Egypt, Thoth was revered as the divine scribe, inventor of writing, science, and mathematics. In Greece, Prometheus gave fire to mankind, sparking civilization itself. Different names, different cultures, but a recurring motif, the gift of knowledge from beyond. Mainstream historians interpret these myths as symbolic, personifications of human ingenuity, clothed in divine imagery. Agriculture may have been discovered by observation, but myth transformed that discovery into the gift of a teacher god. Similarly, writing, astronomy, and metallurgy likely arose through gradual experimentation, later attributed to deities. Yet the similarities across continents leave some uneasy. Why do so many myths feature wandering culture bringers emerging after catastrophe? Could these stories preserve dim memories of survivors from earlier, lost societies, sharing what they could with scattered peoples? Scholars still debate whether this is coincidence, archetypal psychology, or the shadow of real events. Even within these myths, there are warnings. Prometheus was punished for giving fire. Quetzalcoatl's reign ended in betrayal and exile. Viracocha departed when his people no longer listened. These stories suggest that knowledge is double-edged, capable of lifting humanity, but also bringing danger. Perhaps they reflect cultural anxiety about sudden leaps in skill, leaps that seemed too great to come from ordinary human trial and error. Whether divine, symbolic, or historical, mythic teachers serve the same role. They bridge the gap between ignorance and civilization. They embody the mystery of how fragile humans, emerging from floods, jungles, or deserts, acquired the skills to build temples, measure stars, and write laws. They remind us that knowledge is never guaranteed, but must be passed on or lost forever. And in their recurring presence across the world's traditions, they keep alive the tantalizing possibility that we are heirs not just to our own inventions, but to fragments of wisdom carried through the ruins of forgotten ages. Phantom continents. For centuries, maps and myths have whispered of lands that no longer exist, great continents that once bridged oceans, now lost beneath the waves. These phantom continents, whether Atlantis, Mu, or Lemuria, have fascinated seekers and scholars alike. Are they pure invention or distorted memories of real lands drowned at the end of the Ice Age? The story of Atlantis, as we saw earlier, comes from Plato, but in the 19th century, new contenders emerged. Augustus Le Plongeon, an archaeologist exploring the ruins of the Maya, proposed that their civilization descended from a lost continent called Mu, said to lie in the Pacific Ocean. James Churchward expanded the tale in the early 20th century, describing Mu as the cradle of humanity, home to a vast empire destroyed by cataclysm. His accounts, lacking evidence, are dismissed by mainstream science. Yet the idea took root, inspiring generations of seekers who imagine entire continents erased from history. Scholars still debate whether these myths represent allegory, pseudoscience, or faint echoes of real geological events. Lemuria has its own curious history. In the mid-19th century, zoologists puzzled over the distribution of lemurs across Madagascar and India, but not Africa. To explain it, they hypothesized a sunken landmass connecting the regions. Though later replaced by plate tectonics, the name Lemuria lingered. Theosophists adopted it as the home of an ancient, spiritually advanced race, ancestors of humanity. In this way, a scientific placeholder transformed into myth. Geology today tells us that entire continents do not vanish overnight. Plate tectonics moves slowly, consuming seafloor over hundreds of millions of years. Yet smaller landmasses have disappeared more recently. Zealandia, a nearly submerged continent, lies beneath the Pacific, with only New Zealand and New Caledonia above water. Doggerland, once connecting Britain to Europe, sank beneath the North Sea after the Ice Age. Sunderland, stretching across modern Indonesia, was a vast plain drowned as glaciers melted. These real drowned lands suggest that myths of lost continents may have roots in lived experience. Fringe theorists point to places like Yonaguni in Japan or submerged structures off India's coast as evidence of civilizations that once stood on such lands. They argue that Mu or Lemuria may not have been vast continents, but cultural memories of real territories lost to rising seas. While mainstream geology resists the idea of sunken continents in recent time, the end of the Ice Age undeniably reshaped coastlines worldwide, submerging settlements and scattering survivors. Even Antarctica has entered the debate. Some claim that ancient maps, like the Piri Reis map, show the continent free of ice, suggesting knowledge of a vanished land. While mainstream cartography explains this differently, the allure remains: a whole continent, hidden under miles of ice, its history unknown. What might lie beneath, preserved in frozen silence? Phantom continents reveal a deeper truth about human imagination. We dream of lost homelands because loss is part of our nature. We remember fragments of drowned coasts, forgotten migrations, vanished settlements, and we weave them into stories of golden ages and great cataclysms. Whether Mu and Lemuria are pure invention or mythic echoes of real drowned lands, they keep alive the possibility that our planet has hidden more than we know. Scholars still debate whether to read them as fantasy or memory, but either way, they remind us how fragile the line between myth and history can be. Standing on a modern shoreline, it is easy to imagine how rising seas could erase everything we know: cities swallowed, fields drowned, temples forgotten. If that happened before, perhaps the stories of phantom continents are not so much fables as warnings, telling us that the ground beneath us is never as eternal as it seems. Archaeology's blind spots. Archaeology, for all its triumphs, is a discipline shaped as much by what it overlooks as by what it uncovers. The earth is vast, and excavation is slow. What we know of the past is built on a scattering of sites, mere pinpricks across continents. Between them lies an ocean of absence, where entire civilizations could have risen and fallen without leaving us a trace. This is not a criticism of archaeologists, but a reminder of the limits of their tools, their funding, and sometimes their assumptions. Consider how many discoveries were stumbled upon by accident. The Dead Sea Scrolls emerged from a cave where shepherds threw stones. The terracotta army was uncovered by farmers digging a well in China. Utsi the Iceman lay preserved for 5,000 years, only found because 2 hikers strayed from their path in the Alps. How many more wonders lie hidden, waiting for chance to reveal them? Scholars still debate whether the gaps in our record reflect true absence or simply the patchiness of exploration. Bias shapes what we see. For centuries, scholars assumed great monuments could not have been built by indigenous peoples. The earthen mounds of North America, some vast enough to rival Egyptian pyramids in volume, were dismissed as the work of a lost race. Only in the 20th century did archaeology confirm they were built by complex native cultures like the Mississippians. Similarly, Great Zimbabwe in Africa was once attributed to outsiders, until evidence showed it was the achievement of local builders. Such blind spots reveal how prejudice can erase entire civilizations from recognition. Funding also narrows focus. Excavations tend to follow political priorities or spectacular sites. Temples and palaces receive attention. Modest villages and forgotten coastlines often do not. Yet history lives in the mundane as much as in the monumental. Entire cultures may have thrived in regions now overlooked, their traces faint but no less real. Scholars still debate whether the emphasis on certain cradles of civilization blinds us to other, equally important centers of innovation. Geology compounds the problem. Rising seas have drowned coastal plains where early humans likely settled. Dense forests conceal ruins, as in the Amazon. Deserts bury cities in shifting sands. Plate tectonics swallows evidence into the earth itself. What we see is skewed toward what happened to survive in stable, accessible conditions. The true picture may be far more diverse, but most of it is irretrievably gone. Academic caution, too, plays its part. Radical claims are often dismissed unless supported by overwhelming evidence, and rightly so. But this conservatism sometimes means anomalies are ignored rather than investigated. Out-of-place artifacts, contested radiocarbon dates, or unusual oral traditions may be sidelined for fear of association with fringe speculation. While skepticism is essential, it can also stifle curiosity. Scholars still debate where to draw the line between rigour and openness, between protecting the discipline and expanding its horizons. The story of Troy offers a cautionary tale. For centuries, Homer's city was thought to be pure myth. Only in the 19th century did Heinrich Schliemann, controversial though he was, uncover its ruins in Turkey. If Troy could shift from legend to history, might other myths conceal similar truths? How many impossible stories are dismissed today that future discoveries may yet vindicate? Archaeology's blind spots are not failures, but reminders of humility. What we know is provisional, contingent, built on fragments. Our picture of the past may be less a completed mosaic than a handful of tiles arranged into a guess. Beyond them lies a vastness we have not yet touched, a space where forgotten civilizations may still lie, waiting beneath soil, sea or myth to be rediscovered. Technology's fragility. When we marvel at the pyramids or the Antikythera mechanism, it is tempting to think that technology leaves indelible marks. Yet in truth, our inventions are among the most fragile legacies we possess. Stone endures, but machines rust, glass shatters, and paper burns. In a world where even steel skyscrapers can collapse into dust within centuries, what evidence of our own age would survive if humanity vanished tomorrow? Consider our cities. Skyscrapers, bridges, and highways feel immovable, yet nature reclaims them with startling speed. The ruins of Pripyat, abandoned after the Chernobyl disaster in 1986, are already engulfed by forest. In Detroit, once the capital of industry, buildings crumble within decades of neglect. Archaeologists studying Mayan cities note how quickly jungle swallows stone. How much faster would it erase concrete and asphalt? Scholars still debate whether the ruins of modern civilization would be recognizable after 10,000 years, or whether only foundations and fragments would remain. Books and digital media are even more fragile. Papyrus and parchment decay within centuries unless preserved in special conditions. Hard drives degrade, CDs delaminate, and cloud servers vanish the moment electricity ceases. In 1,000 years, almost nothing of our digital world would be legible. Contrast this with clay tablets from Mesopotamia, which endured for millennia simply because they were baked in accidental fires. The irony is stark. Our most advanced records may prove less durable than the simplest scratchings in clay. Even metals corrode. Iron rusts away within centuries, bronze within millennia. Gold endures, but it is rare and often melted down. Plastic, often cited as our most enduring legacy, breaks into microfragments that scatter into sediments. Some geologists argue that plastic, along with nuclear isotopes from mid-20th century tests, may be the clearest markers of the Anthropocene layer in Earth's strata. But these traces would be subtle, chemical signatures rather than monuments. Scholars still debate whether a future civilization, millions of years hence, would recognize us by anything more than odd isotopes and a faint plastic sheen. The loss of technology is not hypothetical. History already shows us how easily skills vanish. Roman concrete, once unmatched, was forgotten for 1,500 years. The formula for Damascus steel disappeared by the 18th century. Even in modern times, digital obsolescence renders entire archives unreadable in decades. Fragility is not the exception, but the rule. This fragility reframes the question of earlier civilizations. If one had arisen tens of thousands of years ago, would we expect to find its machines intact? Almost certainly not. Even if they built with metals or composites, time would reduce them to dust. Only monumental works in stone or myths might survive. Thus, the absence of machines in our record may not prove their non-existence, but only their impermanence. Scholars still debate whether we are justified in demanding physical proof, or whether the silence of time makes such proof nearly impossible. Our own era illustrates the paradox. We are the most technologically advanced species the Earth has ever known, yet we may leave fewer durable traces than the farmers of 5,000 years ago. Future archaeologists might find scattered ruins, a chemical layer of plastics and isotopes, and perhaps a few preserved objects entombed in ice or desert. From that, would they reconstruct smartphones, rockets, or the internet? Or would they imagine us simpler than we are, as we may underestimate those before us? Technology's fragility is both humbling and haunting. It suggests that the line between our world and the worlds that came before may be thinner than we think. Just as our skyscrapers would vanish, so too could theirs. Just as our knowledge could dissolve, so too could theirs. And so we are left with a sobering thought. Perhaps the ruins we do not see are not proof of absence, but proof of how little even the grandest machines can endure against the slow, patient erasure of time. Alternate timelines. The further we peer into the past, the less it looks like a straight path, and the more it resembles a tangle of possible timelines. Civilizations rise, collapse, and rise again, sometimes leaving only the faintest traces. If we consider the possibility of civilizations before our own, it is not hard to imagine that history may be cyclical, with timelines of ascent and decline hidden beneath the silence of time. Mainstream archaeology frames our story as linear. Hunter-gatherers gave way to farmers, villages became cities, cities birthed states, and states grew into civilizations. Yet even within recorded history, this linearity falters. The Bronze Age collapse around 1200 BCE wiped out empires across the Mediterranean, plunging societies into centuries of regression. The fall of Rome scattered literacy and engineering, leading to a medieval world where much had to be relearned. What seems like inevitable progress is, in truth, fragile and easily reversed. Scholars still debate whether we should speak of human history as progress at all, or as a rhythm of gain and loss. Fringe perspectives expand this rhythm into grand cycles. In Hindu cosmology, yugas repeat endlessly, each age rising and falling. The Maya envisioned successive worlds, each destroyed in turn. Even Plato's Atlantis can be read as one such cycle. A civilization destroyed, knowledge scattered, humanity forced to start over. These traditions suggest not a straight line, but a wheel, turning through ages, some remembered, others lost. What if alternate timelines of civilization existed in deep prehistory? Perhaps Ice Age peoples developed advanced navigation, seeding myths of global maps. Perhaps earlier societies mastered metallurgy or energy sources we cannot yet imagine, their tools erased by time. The absence of evidence need not mean they never were. It may simply mean their works decayed, leaving only faint myths of gods and culture bringers. Scholars still debate whether such speculation is fruitful curiosity or unfounded fantasy. Even within known history, lost knowledge fuels this idea. The Antikythera mechanism appears as a sudden leap, then vanishes for over a millennium. Roman concrete, stronger than our own, disappeared until rediscovered by accident. Damascus steel's secret evaporated into legend. These are not distant prehistories, but recent examples, proof that entire technologies can vanish within centuries. Scale that loss across tens of thousands of years, and alternate timelines of forgotten civilizations seem less improbable. Modern science, too, entertains a version of this thought. Some researchers have proposed the Silurian hypothesis. If an industrial civilization had existed millions of years ago, would we detect it today? The answer is sobering. Beyond subtle chemical signatures in sediments, almost nothing would remain. Fossilization is rare. Structures erode, and tectonic recycling consumes the crust. We could miss an entire civilization, just as future beings might miss ours. Alternate timelines remind us how much is contingent. What if the Younger Dryas' impact had not occurred? What if Rome had never fallen, or the Library of Alexandria had survived? History is shaped by chance as much as by will, and if chance has erased civilizations within recorded memory, how much more might it have hidden in the long abyss of prehistory? Ultimately, alternate timelines are less about proving lost civilizations than about humility. They remind us that our present age may not be the first nor the last. They invite us to see ourselves as part of a greater cycle, one civilization among many, flickering briefly against the vast backdrop of time. Whether others walked before us or not, the possibility itself is enough to unsettle a notion that we stand alone at history's summit. The humbling possibility, step back from the monuments, the myths, and the anomalies, and a single, humbling possibility emerges. We may not be the first civilization to call this planet home. Whether or not the Sphinx is older than we think, whether or not Atlantis was real, whether or not OOPArts are genuine, the deeper truth lies in the fragility of evidence itself. Civilizations are brief sparks against the immensity of geological time, and sparks are easily extinguished. Mainstream science reminds us that Homo sapiens are only one of many hominins. Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo floresiensis all lived, thrived, and vanished. In each case, their legacies are faint, recoverable only through fragments of bone or traces in DNA. If entire human species can disappear so thoroughly, why not civilizations? Scholars still debate whether the archaeological record is sufficient to rule out such possibilities, or whether our knowledge is only a fragment of a larger, hidden story. The silence of deep time amplifies this humility. Oceans rise, burying coasts where millions may have lived. Forests reclaim cities within centuries. Stone endures, but machines dissolve. Even if skyscrapers stood on Earth 100,000 years ago, little would remain now. As the Silurian hypothesis suggests, detecting an industrial civilization millions of years later would be nearly impossible. Our own world, if wiped clean, might leave only chemical fingerprints in the rocks. Fringe traditions remind us that memory may survive where monuments do not. Myths of floods, fire, and culture bringers may encode distorted memories of earlier resets. From Mesopotamian kings who reigned for tens of thousands of years to Quetzalcoatl teaching agriculture after catastrophe, the echoes repeat. Humanity begins again and again. Whether literal or allegorical, they embody the possibility that we are not the first, only the latest. Scholars still debate whether such myths are imagination or cultural fossils of real events. What humbles us most is how small our own age truly is. Civilization as we know it, cities, writing, technology, has existed for perhaps 6,000 years, a blink against the 300,000 years of Homo sapiens, and less than a whisper compared to Earth's 4.5 billion years. If we vanished tomorrow, how confident could we be that no others rose and fell in the vast, unrecorded stretches before us? Our pride tempts us to see ourselves as unique, inevitable, the pinnacle of evolution. But the humbling possibility is that we are only one chapter in a far longer book, most of whose pages have burned. The pyramids and machines we marvel at may not be unprecedented, but echoes, distant rhymes of achievements made and lost before. Even if we never find proof, the silence itself compels humility. To stand in this perspective is to feel the weight of deep time press gently against us, reminding us that our skyscrapers, our satellites, even our names will vanish as completely as those of Sumer and Tiwanaku. Perhaps another age will rise after ours, peering into the same silence, wondering if we ever existed at all. Closing reflection. And so we arrive at the threshold of wonder, having wandered through stones, myths, and silences that stretch across the ages. Each clue, whether Göbekli Tepe's impossible temples, the Antikythera mechanism's silent gears, or the Sumerian kings who reigned for tens of thousands of years, pulls at a single thread: the possibility that history is not as simple, not as linear as we imagine. Mainstream archaeology offers a framework grounded in evidence, reminding us that extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. It shows us the beauty of what we do know, the artistry of Neanderthal cave paintings, the precision of Inca stonework, the ingenuity of Maya calendars. Yet, alongside these truths lie the fringes, anomalies, legends, and out-of-place artifacts that stir curiosity. Were they mistakes, myths, or glimpses of something more? Scholars still debate where to draw the line between cautious skepticism and expansive imagination. The silence of deep time is the greatest enigma of all. Earth is a restless archivist, erasing as much as it preserves. Seas rise, forests devour, deserts conceal. Civilizations, no matter how grand, can vanish almost without a trace. Our own will, too. In 10,000 years, what will remain of us? Perhaps only faint chemical signatures, fragments of monuments, and myths retold by those who come after. If that is our fate, why assume it has never been the fate of others? The humbling possibility is not that we are Atlantis, or that we descend from lost empires, but that Earth's story is longer and stranger than we can yet comprehend. We are but one note in a symphony of time, brief and bright, echoing across billions of years. Whether others played before us or not may remain unknowable, but the question itself deepens our sense of wonder. To close, imagine this: standing at the edge of the sea at dusk, waves lapping where once there may have been cities or temples or farms. The horizon glows, and above it the stars turn in their eternal cycles, the same stars our ancestors once measured with stone and myth. We look upward and outward, but the mystery lies beneath our feet, layer upon layer of forgotten worlds, erased yet not entirely gone. And in the hush of night we feel it, the quiet awe that perhaps we are not the first, and certainly will not be the last, to dream of eternity in a world that remembers so little. Conclusion. In contemplating whether we are the first civilization, we do not diminish our achievements, we deepen our humility. The myths of floods, the enigmas of stone, the whispers in our DNA, all remind us that history is fragile, evidence fleeting, and time unimaginably vast. Perhaps humanity's uniqueness is not that we are the first, but that we are storytellers who ask such questions at all. Our search for lost civilizations is, in the end, a search for ourselves, our place in deep time, our awareness of impermanence, our yearning to belong to something greater than the present moment. Whether alone in our chapter or one voice in a long-forgotten chorus, we remain part of Earth's endless story, and that is mystery enough to keep us gazing into the past with awe, into the future with wonder, and into the stars with hope.